Hi, I'm Esther, and I'm going to be reading from the Missing Vagina Monologue. The article can be found at mrkh.org in its complete version. I want to thank the crew at GenderVision for making this possible, and everybody from Beverly Community Access Media for getting this on the air. And I want to thank all of you for listening. Curious to learn what women were talking about, I read the Vagina Monologues. I wasn't curious about the play. I was curious about vaginas. I am a woman who was born without one. This could be the Missing Vagina Monologue or a monologue for missing vaginas, but either way, it's a story that deserves more attention. Mayer-Rokitansky-Kuster-Hauser syndrome is a condition that involves the absence of fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix, and vagina. Other symptoms involved are kidney abnormalities, skeletal problems, and hearing loss. The incidence is about 1 in 5,000, but the cause is somewhat unclear. There's not much research on the whole body. It's mostly about creating vaginas for normal sexual function. My main concern is not how the syndrome develops, but how women are transformed because of it. Trauma. It spirals, touching down at different times in my life. In a scary way, I hope it never ends. True, the conflict and shame I would be well rid of, but the presence of mind keeps me holding on, ever hoping to grasp or accept the origin of my being. Wishing I could have had choices, the chance to desire change on my own, embracing opportunity rather than fleeing who I was and fearing who I was supposed to be. Too much focus on making me right, when I was quite content with myself, thank you very much. My life completely changed when I was 13 and sent home from camp with abdominal pain. I was examined and they discovered an imperforated hymen prohibiting the flow of menstrual blood. I had my first surgery then, to open my hymen so I could bleed. But they found that I had no vagina, just a dimple, and they could detect no uterus. I had secondary sex characteristics, body hair and breasts, so they assumed I had ovaries, but no one knew where. The medical profession has known about MRKH since 1838, but I was diagnosed with congenital absence of vagina. My pain was quickly forgotten. I was suddenly and shamefully different. I went from selling Girl Scout cookies to correcting my sexual dysfunction in one afternoon. I spent the next few years going to specialists, having tests done to confirm my gender, being probed by curious doctors and interns with multiple instruments in multiple holes at multiple times. Not seeing what they wanted, they saw a narrow version of normal, and I wasn't it. I was too young to know I had the right to ask questions, or the right to slow this process down to fit my own state of mind. I had major doubts about what was going on and what was being done to me, but I was not yet capable of understanding who was having the biggest problem with my body. Was it me or the people treating me? Frightened in a hospital gown, I did what I was told, and my relationship with my body ended. Suddenly, I had no right to have it in the shape that it was in. Like an android on an assembly line, I have this concept of feeling that my body was never mine. There was so much focus on the woman that I should be that I lost all knowledge of the girl that I was. Once I was officially determined female, my reconstruction was arranged. I had my second and third surgeries when I was 15 and a half. That summer, I took a trip to avoid explaining why I had to go to the hospital. I missed family weddings and graduations for my Macindoe surgery. A slight dimple was present where the vagina was expected to be. A transverse incision was made. By means of blunt and sharp dissection, a very adequate vagina was developed. A split-thickness skin graft was obtained from the left buttocks and attached to the mold. The balsam mold was then inserted into the cavity. The skin graft that extended was attached to the vaginal introitus. The vagina was closed, and all sponges were accounted for. 17 days later, I had phase 2, my third surgery, to have the mold and stitches removed. Then I was told about post-operative therapy that would keep my vagina functional. A functional vagina is a vagina that will accept a normal-sized penis. I was given vaginal dilators, brief instruction to insert one every month, and the problem was solved, for everyone but me. I had 2 follow-up visits with the surgeon and never saw him again. I was another medical success. Why was my gender challenged in the first place, then confirmed like something I didn't already know? Why was my body taken away and rearranged like a sexual action figure by men with knives? What was the need to feminize my body, which actually neutered my soul? I wasn't able to see what all this fuss was about. All the excitement just reinforced my despair. I was living with this anomaly and feeling terribly wrong for the fact that I didn't care that I was born without a vagina. Like a hunchback in a bell tower, I found the place to hide when normalcy failed me. Tidbits of emotion overwhelmed me in very big ways. I was learning that normal was merely a concept for people who couldn't cope with anything different. I alienated myself from peers who would rightfully complain about menstrual cramps. But no, I don't have a tampon. As I grew older, I realized I was faced with many questions. How will I experience menopause? How do I monitor my ovaries? Where are my ovaries, and how many do I have? What about pap smears, regular breast exams? I was tired of all of this and really pissed that I had to ask all the questions. I finally had another medical workup done in my early 30s. Technology had changed and they found one ovary. 2 years later, they found the other one. My sister sent me an article, and I learned about MRKH for the very first time. The reports my specialist sent me had left that diagnosis out, but the last one was quick to point out that my vagina had shrunk. Finally, in my 40s, I had something to call this other than bizarre. That is when I discovered the other symptoms associated with my condition. The connection to years of disability and hearing loss made me numb. Could I have avoided disability had I known I had a condition that was not suited for my chosen profession? Could I have avoided hearing aids had I known that I had MRKH and that hearing loss was part of that? These are things I will never know, but always have to live with. A whole new perspective was growing from very old emotions. Reading articles about MRKH made this painfully clear that this wasn't just about bodies, and that the corrective approach to genitals should not simply be assumed. Education and counseling would have offered me a more viable solution. If I had wanted surgery later in life, then I could work toward that. I feel abnormal because I had to be fixed, not for the truth about my body. I feel different because of my surgeries, not for my vaginal dimple. Being born without a vagina was not my problem. Having to get one was the real problem. It's not that my vagina has shrunk that alarms me now, it's the fact that we judge vaginas at all. People don't fail to meet the definition of normal gender, but the confines of the definitions fail to meet the people. I have researched the various surgeries and treatments used to create vaginas. Dilation is a method that uses pressure to stretch the tissue enough to create an acceptable depth. Bowel and intestine are also used to create vaginas for normal sexual function. I read one case where a vagina was transplanted from the patient's mother. My mother's used vagina? There are a few studies on the psychosocial development of women with vaginal agenesis. The doctors more or less credit themselves for making us feel normal again. But they are the ones who put us out by telling us that we're abnormal. One doctor wrote how an angry, withdrawn, muscular girl was transformed into a woman responsive in coitus and eager to adopt children. I can assure you that she worked much harder than he did. I found an online support group for women with MRKH, and after years of isolation, I was totally overwhelmed. The case studies I had been reading about became real women who finally humanized this experience for me. Some of their stories seemed so traumatic that it challenged me to recognize that their trauma was also mine. These women taught me more about treatment and courage in a week than any stack of articles or doctor ever could. Our dysfunction has been treated, our success rates have been tallied, then we're sent out in the world to make peace with it all. I felt driven to read between the lines, so I asked some questions of my own. I compiled a survey and emailed it to the group. I got most of my information from the question, what else do you have to say? And there is so much more to this than normal sexual function. So much more to the women I am listening to now. Most of us feel that our lack of body parts threatens our identity. We get that message loud and clear, and for some, that scars the most. We battle frequent depression. We hate being told how lucky we are by people who don't have a clue. Some are saddest that we can't bear children, but there is no procedure to give us wombs. Every woman who answered my survey wanted their doctors and the public to be more aware about MRKH. Of the 21 women who responded, only 4 of their doctors had heard of MRKH before the initial pelvic exam. The rest of our doctors were shocked and excited about treating us. One woman's doctor left her in the stirrups while he ran into his office to look a few things up. Most of us never knew we had a syndrome until years after our vaginal procedures. And one woman's doctor gave her a vaginal dilator and compared it to a shoe stretcher. He then suggested she become a nun. 12 of the 15 women who completed treatment felt that it was required to be sexually active, normal, or loved. Some of the women questioned the importance of intercourse. What's the point? I'll never get pregnant, and we share pleasure in so many ways. All were told by their doctors that their treatments were successful, but not all of those women agreed. One woman was called a freak by her sex partner. Another woman was asked why her vagina was so shallow. And another woman was asked, "Can't you fix that thing?" Until that moment, she thought she had. I have read a lot about the medical challenge of treating women with vaginal agenesis, but I think the challenge is broader than that. We challenge the role presented to women, and that makes people very nervous. We challenge the concept of normal for gender and sexual activity, and that makes people fanatic. Indeed, we are atypical, but we are women all the same. We start out our lives as normal little girls. Then suddenly something suggests maybe we're not. The foundation of our identity crumbles when we don't measure up. We are literally molded to fit social values. We accommodate sexual standards to a phenomenal extreme with a determination never dreamed possible. We are faced with questions of our most vulnerable selves in our most formative years. But how can you follow your heart to the answer when the process has ripped out your heart? I come out about my surgery in carefully selected ways. I have seen the response of too many twisted faces telling me they have never heard of such a thing. They show me pity. They tell their friends this great gossip, and strangers ask intrusive questions on the street corner. One provider told me I was just too weird. I have been physically assaulted by women who presumed I was transgender and too active in the women's community. I have been asked if this is what made me a lesbian, by lesbians born with vaginas. Questions have haunted me for too many years because I couldn't find the words. Knowing others with a similar experience has finally allowed me a voice. My condition seems extreme only because it's unheard of. We exist in a conundrum because our knowledge is powerful but hidden in embarrassment and shame. The approach to our treatment is very extreme but affects all women in subtler ways. Advances in medicine offer men Viagra, but women still get the knife. Scar tissue does not enhance sexual pleasure. I want people to understand that doing the right thing can often do more harm than good. The standard of normal that we aim for is imaginary. We alter women's bodies when attitudes could be adjusted. Correcting our genitals tells us they are wrong. Different is not wrong. Different is different. Identity shouldn't be centered around body parts, missing, constructed, or removed. Women with MRKH should be treated for our syndrome rather than isolated for our sexual disorder. My absence of vagina posed less of a threat to my health than the parts of the syndrome that disabled me. So why is a vagina all I was given to cope with a much greater loss? Thank you.